Well, welcome to the Leadership Lounge. It's lovely for you to join us again, and I'm here with my good friend Anna Hennell James.
Hello.
And we are looking again this month at Everyday Alchemy. Everyday Alchemy is the new book that I'm about to release, and we're doing a series of podcasts on this, and today we're going to be looking at the core way that in a moment, how you make the best of it by pausing, reflecting, and responding. And like last podcast, the tables are turning.
Yep.
Anna is actually going to interview me, and we're going to explore that today. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you. So just as we start, Colin, for those who are tuning in for the first time, can you just give us a summary as to what Everyday Alchemy is and is all about?
Yeah. So Everyday Alchemy is a new book that I have based around the principles of the folklore of the ancient alchemists. So the ancient alchemists, they had several aims in their life, one of which was the ability to turn everyday metals into gold, to transmute, to take from one form to another. They were also looking at the secret for eternal youth and to the stone of knowledge as well. But the main thing they were known for was trying to turn metal into gold. And now this isn't a book about witchcraft or anything like that, but it's learning from the principle of how do I take something that's seemingly worthless and turn it into something that has real value. So it's looking at, in a moment when we face something, how do I make the best from it? And that's what we're going to explore today, that particular aspect, but also after the event, how you review it, how you go back and revisit what's happening, you review it and have a different perspective, get the full perspective of things in order to learn from it and to grow from it. Because ultimately, Everyday Alchemy is about developing that true sense of resilience, so that we're not just surviving a moment, but we're learning and growing and thriving. So it's about thriving, not surviving, and it's about that ability to do the best in the moment, but learn from that moment in order to grow as a person.
Sounds good. So you've said today we're going to be exploring pause, reflect, respond.
Yes.
Why is it not good to just react then?
Yes. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? If we think about many situations that, particularly if they press our button, we tend to react. And the problem with reacting is that the situation is controlling us rather than us controlling the situation. So if we are just reacting and not thinking about it, maybe we're really annoyed about something, so we get really cross and we shout. Actually, we're not making the best of this situation. And reaction is often just because it comes at the very kind of first thought that comes to our mind. And it's quite instinctive as part of that process. So yeah, that's probably why it's not a great idea to do that particular aspect as we respond.
Good to know that. So, and you encourage us to be everyday alchemists and to use pause to take a moment when we're in a situation. So how does that actually help us?
Yeah, so pausing allows us just to stop and note what's going on within ourselves. So when we react, it tends to be that knee-jerk reaction. We're not even thinking or processing how we're doing. Somebody said something to us, we get very angry about it. So that pause allows us just to stop and to notice. And what I encourage people to do as an everyday alchemist is just to notice what's happening within you, what's happening within your body first of all. So as you pause, what do I notice about myself? What's my heart rate like? What's my breathing like? Oh yeah, I've got a flushing in my neck. That's interesting. Yeah, my heart rate's increasing. All of this is, in that moment of pause, telling us something. But if we're taking that moment to pause, it allows us to think about, what is this telling me? So if I feel my heart rate increasing, if I feel my neck flushing, it's telling me that, oh, hang on, I'm getting ready for a bit of fight, flight, freeze here. My body is getting ready for some form of confrontation. So the first thing is just to note that element within us, and just listening to our body. It also allows us to think about what am I thinking and feeling at the moment? What are the emotions I've got in this moment? There's a brilliant book written by a guy called Steve Peters called The Chimp Paradox, and he talks about our inner emotional self is like a chimp. And so it gets very agitated. And so it's just in that moment of pause, almost saying to yourself, what is my inner chimp feeling at the moment? And if we're going, oh, actually, I'm feeling really cross, I'm feeling really angry, I know I'm cross because I can feel it in my body. And Steve Peters says the first thing actually to help calm your chimp in that moment is to acknowledge the emotion. So if we've taken that moment of pause, it allows us to think about the emotion, acknowledge it, and even that moment in itself allows us to begin to calm in that first thing. So rather than just react, coming straight back with that guttural response, that we, in that moment, just pause and note, what's my body feeling? What are my emotions feeling? And that allows us then to begin that journey of controlling the situation because we're not reacting and the situation controlling us.
Okay. And in the book, Colin, you talk about the importance of grounding and being in the moment. What is that about, that grounding?
So if you are in this moment and you can feel, you've just taken a moment to pause and you've realised, oh, hang on, my heart rate's increasing. I've got a flushing in my neck. My breathing is shortening slightly. I'm actually cross. And so what we are at this stage now is that we are accelerating. Our body is pumping and we need to calm ourselves at this moment. Now, what also happens in this moment is we are starting to futurize. So when we get anxious or worried, we're starting to think about all the things that are going wrong in the future. If I don't get this right, it's going wrong. So grounding enables us in that pause moment just to bring ourselves back to the present. Now, there are different ways you can do that grounding. The first is just to control your breathing. So if you're noting in your breathing, hang on, my breathing is shortening, is that you can, if you start to slow your breathing, and what I talk to clients about is breathe in for 5 seconds, hold for 5 seconds, out for 5 seconds. Some of my clients go, I can't hold my breath for 5 seconds.
That feels like quite a long time.
And it does feel quite long, but so you can, shorten or lengthen your 5. But it's the whole principle of in, hold, out, and just to do that 5 times. So that that'll take you is 75 seconds. Some of you are quickly doing the maths now. And that 75 seconds is just slowing your breathing. What that's doing, interestingly, is by you slowing your breathing, your lungs are sending a message back to your brain of, no, we're not in the fight-flight mode. So you start to slow the breathing. The brain then goes, oh, okay, so maybe we're not in fight-flight. And you're starting now to regain control of yourself before you regain control of the situation.
Bringing some kind of calm back.
Bringing some calm back to you so that you're not responding in that emotional center of the brain. You can begin to then connect with the frontal lobe where some of your more cognitive processing will happen. The other thing you can do for grounding is if you find yourself, you've really got quite agitated, is just look for 5 things you can see in the room, 5 things you can notice that maybe even you didn't notice before. Listen for 5 things that you can hear, 5 things that you can feel, even just you rubbing your fingers on it, or actually I'm now wiggling my toes, I can feel my socks. I didn't feel my socks before, I decided to wiggle them. And what you're doing again is just bringing yourself into the present, which means you're now just beginning to get control of yourself so that you can then take control of the situation. So that grounding allows you to do that.
So they're all small strategies that can help sort of build that pause in for you and help to ensure that you are staying in control of it rather than it being in control of you.
Yes, yeah.
So when we look at the emotions in all of that, what's the difference between the emotions you get if you just go for the boom react and what you get if you go for the respond?
Yeah, so in the book, I'm just going to bring some of these emotions up for us. So here are some of the reaction situations that you have. So reaction situations are anxiety, worry, fear, jealousy, resentment, frustration, anguish, despair. So I'll list these in the book. Shame, embarrassment, anger. These kind of emotions will have the tendency to react. What we're trying to do is move more into emotions that will enable us to respond as part of that process. So our respond emotions are things like compassion, empathy, awe, curiosity, interest, trust, belonging, joy. These are much more responsive emotions rather than reactive. So what we're trying to do is recognize the emotion that we're feeling within. That starts by, again, just in that moment of pause, recognizing what's my body telling me. Oh, my body's telling me actually I'm cross, I'm angry. Well, angry is a very reactionary emotion. That pause allows us to connect to those body feelings and the emotions, so that we know, hang on, am I right to respond now? So I give a brilliant example in the book of where a vet practice that, so we've got some dogs, and we had some treatment by that, but we actually weren't particularly happy with his vet practice, and so we given notice to leave. We were going to go to another practice, and I checked, right, have we all paid up? Yes, you're all paid up. But then we got my wife got a phone call saying, you owe money, why haven't you paid it? A quite stroppy phone call from someone from the vet practice. And so my wife told me this. I was furious. I was really angry because I checked this, and then they'd actually, the person who'd phoned had been quite demeaning to my wife. And so I didn't follow the advice I've learned from this, hence why I've written the book. I was angry. And I picked up the phone and asked to speak to the practice manager, and I was going to tell the practice manager what I thought of the way his staff handled things, but also, I'd checked and yet you hadn't done this. So because I'm angry, I am then angry on the phone, and I used some angry words, but some very clever, I thought I was being clever to make this person realise how bad. Of course, it takes me till halfway through the conversation to realise, oh, hang on, I'm now telling off this practice manager for exactly what one of his staff did to my wife, because I made that phone call with anger, because I didn't take the time to go, am I in the right position? What's my body telling me? What emotion am I feeling? And had I done that and realised I was feeling anger, then actually I wouldn't have made the call at that point. I would have taken some time. I would have gone and done some breathing exercises. I'd have gone for a little walk. I then would have said to myself, am I now ready? And if I still wasn't ready because I still felt that anger, then it still wasn't the time for that phone call. So it's just taking that time to note the emotions that we've kind of got within us, and to then begin to recognise which emotion have I got, acknowledge that emotion, take some steps to calm yourself and to process that emotion. What is it in me that's making me feel angry? Okay, and what is it about this situation? And begin to take a fuller picture of the situation, and then to begin to ask myself, okay, so if I'm going to deal with this, what's needed in this moment?
And am I going to get the best outcome if I'm dealing with it now?
And which emotion do I need to tap into instead? And so once I begin to come out of the anger, that I might then, if I look in the book here, I might begin to think about, could I tap into curiosity, asking questions more rather than making accusations. Now, I might not be feeling calm or contentment even going into that conversation, but I can still perhaps tap into some curiosity that might then help me hold the conversation a little bit better than when I'm feeling anger. So that moment of pause allows us just to recognise those emotions as part of the process.
That's really helpful, because it's about just helping us to think about how we are going to deal with situations. And in chapter 5, you build on that. Chapter 5 is about reflecting, and you talk about the 4 W's, which are questions that can help you. So can you talk us through what these 4 questions are and how that bit works, Colin?
Yeah, let's pull these up actually. So the questions, there's 4 W's, 4 questions. The first is, what is in my control? So, if we take the example with the vet thing, what's in my control here? Well, what's in my control is how I behave or how I respond. And as we said, actually, I didn't choose that. But if we're going to follow the Everyday Alchemy approach, it's okay. It's saying, right, I've noted in my body, I've got these emotions I'm processing, I'm dealing with them. Right, now, what's in my control? That's the first one. There are some things that are not in my control, so I can't control other people's behaviour. I can't control perhaps the situation or the crowd that's going on here, but I can control what I do, how I behave, what I say. who I choose to connect with. The second question, which I think in some ways, the second W is in some ways the most important one, which is who do I want to be in this moment? If I was to look back in an hour's time, in a day's time, will I be pleased with how I have performed? So who is it I want to be in this moment? What do I want to be known for as I look back and reflect? How do I want to be seen? The next one is which values can guide me. So the beautiful thing about values is values are dexterous and flexible. Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where sometimes we find ourselves in situations where there is a rule book. If somebody does this, we do this. But sometimes we find ourselves in situations where there is no playbook, there is no rule.
Yeah. And
we've got to make a decision and think, how do I respond here? And so values give us that dexterity. Let me give you the example. My core values are authenticity and integrity. And so if I am in a situation that I'm not quite sure how to respond, it's a little bit volatile perhaps, or it's a little bit uncertain. In fact, the phrase is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex or ambiguous. Yes. If I find myself in one of those or in a combination of those where, well, this could go a bit wrong, this could go really volatile, and actually I'm really not sure what is the right thing to do here, what I would then do is tap onto what does authenticity look like in this moment? What does integrity look like in this moment? So whatever I do, whatever I say, however I behave, I want to do it guided by authenticity, being real, being open, being honest, and I want it to be integrity. I want to do the right thing even if no one was looking. And so if I'm in a situation, I'm asking myself, okay, whatever I say and do is guided by those. Now, you choose the values that you can tap into. In fact, in the book, it gives you a number of values that might be really helpful in these moments, that are really useful for everyday alchemists to respond. But you ask yourself, what values do I hold on to? Because each of us will have personal ones.
Yeah, everybody will have their own different values, won't they?
And how can I use this in this moment? Almost you imagine them like Tom and Jerry. Tom and Jerry gets a bang on the head and they have the little angel and the little devil on the shoulder. It's imagining these values as like the little angel going, whatever you do, Colin, make sure you do it, that you're authentic. So they're guiding you. What does this look like? You might decide, I want the value of honesty. I want the value of compassion. I want the value of curiosity. Whatever it is, that you allow that to drive you as part of that process. And the fourth W is, where is the treasure? So the whole principle of everyday alchemy is that situations are not binary pass-fail. We view them quite often as that, but they don't have to be. An everyday alchemist is saying to themselves, right, I can make some gold out of this. What is my gold? This feels like it's a bit trashy, but this could be treasure. What could be the treasure in this moment? And quite often the treasure is, what can I learn? What can I learn about myself? What can I learn about moments like this? The treasure might be about how I discover something about this person. So actually, if this person you quite regularly have to deal with, the treasure can be discovering a new way, a new approach that just helps shifted the mindset and the behavior of the other person. It could be a new thing you learn about yourself. Oh, it's interesting. When I just ask questions, that really opened the conversation up, and it didn't feel like a confrontation anymore. So you're just saying to yourself, what's my treasure here? What could be something of value? And most of the time, it's around that thing around learning. So those are the four W's. And ultimately, these four questions are here to help us make the best of the moment. And this first part is about doing the best that I can with all that I have in this moment that I'm in. And those four W's just help you, and particularly that one, who do I want to be? And if you're asking yourself that second one particularly, it'll guide you. I don't want to look like a numpty. When I replay this movie, I don't want to think, oh yeah, you were a bit arrogant, or oh yeah, you were really angry, or you were a bit stroppy. I want to look back at this and go, I was really composed. I was really calm. I didn't let that person niggle me. And so if you're saying to yourself, that's who I want to be, and you bring that to the forefront of your mind, then that drives you to behave in that way.
And guides you how to behave. And in the book, Colin, you talk about a personal experience that was, it's a hard story to hear. I still remember the time when it all unfolded, and you messaging me, and I was just like, no, that's not how it's going to be. No, they won't do that, and they did.
Yeah.
And despite that, you maintained that locus of control, and you were the best version of yourself, and you definitely behaved in a way that you would want to look back on and go, yeah, that how I dealt with that was okay.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting moment, and of course, here am I, the author of a book. Here am I, a coach, a leadership coach, a trainer. But I remember clearly at the time when this happened. So I was a head teacher. I've been a head teacher for 17 years. Taken school through challenging circumstance, and I'd actually given notice to leave my job in order to set up this organisation. But before my notice period ended, we had an Ofsted. And the Ofsted inspection was all going really well till 11 o'clock. And I clearly remember then the lead inspector coming to me and saying, we have a bit of a problem. And the problem was that there was some missing reference paperwork from when they'd done a dip test of staff to test. And obviously this is really important. It's a key part of safeguarding. It shouldn't have happened. But there were some missing reference paperwork. And as a result of that, the school was told that it was going to fail its inspection. Now, interestingly, several months later, it was actually given a requires improvement rather than a serious weakness. But at that point, we were told it was going to be serious weaknesses because this was missing. And clearly, as a head teacher, you're responsible for all things that go on within your school.
Yeah.
However, there are individuals that were responsible for that paperwork. The trust was responsible, but the end result after that inspection, so the inspection finished on Thursday, and Sunday afternoon I got a phone call from the CEO saying, if you turn up at school tomorrow, this is what's going to happen, or you could just go. It was the archetypal being asked to leave. And you can imagine, as a school leader over many years, that was a really difficult moment. If I'm honest, it felt really embarrassing. And of course, there's a part as a school leader, you feel responsible. I was prepared to, okay, there's a mistake made. I have to hold some responsibility for that. I need to get that sorted. But I wasn't able to do that because they asked me to leave. And so I'm then in a position of like, okay, I no longer have a job. I no longer am a head teacher. It's not ended in a way that's really positive. It's ended with something going wrong. It's ended with a sense of shame, actually, as well. And there was a sense for me of, I'd given notice I was going to set up this leadership training and coaching organisation. Who's going to want to use me when there's just been a failed inspection, when my name will still, it remains on that report forever. I've done enough things since that actually it's now on page 4 of Google rather than page 1, but it remains there forever. And so all that's going through your mind of almost a sense of shame, and where it feels out of your control. But I remember at the time thinking really clearly what's in my control. And there were some key mantras that I used for myself, one of which is, what story do you want to write? Another was, bitterness will remain far from my door. That I didn't want to be this then bitter, angry person that it's been done to me, and et cetera, even though obviously part of it had. But I also wanted, there's a sense where I have to take responsibility for some things that were missing too, the bits that were underneath my remit. Obviously it was under the other people's as well. But I wanted to make sure going ahead that I didn't become this bitter, twisted person. So I just had to remind myself what's within my control. What's within my control is how I respond to things, how I behave. If anybody says something to me, how I don't, start saying angry things about what's happened, because all that will do is create bitterness. So I knew I was in control of managing my emotions. Now, I can't stop the emotion coming in. So you can't stop that sense of anxiety or worry or upset coming in. That will come in, that thought will come into your mind, but I am in control of how I process that thought. I am in control of who I make connection with to walk with me through that time of challenge and difficulty. And so it's just beginning to bring it back to what's within my control. So the reason I tell that story is because this is honest, this is real, and it's about, us knowing that we all go through these challenging moments, and when we're in these challenging, I use some people say, oh, it's a bit of a silly word to use, Colin, as a grown up, but I say ploppy. We're in these ploppy moments. It just saves me saying the really rude word. We're in this ploppy moment, and when we suddenly find ourselves in ploppy moments, we feel like the control has been taken away from us. And when we feel control's taken away from us, that creates anxiety. And in extreme versions, that creates a moment of trauma because so much was taken away. I felt so helpless. And it feels traumatic. And I'll have to be honest in that there were moments, and I remember when it happening, it just felt completely traumatic because I saw what was a good school, what should have got a good result, just going, just going down the toilet at that point. So it was quite traumatic. What allows us to reduce the anxiety and reduce the trauma is in these moments saying, what am I in control of? I can't control, in my case, the inspection that was happening to me. I can't control this result, but what I can do is control my behavior, control my thinking in terms of if a thought comes in, I will take time to process it. I can control who I speak to for advice, who I get support from in this moment to enable me to be the best version of myself. So it doesn't take the problem away, but it brings a locus of control. So locus meaning a point of control where I have some control over the elements I have control of. All the while we're thinking about what we don't have control of, we will feel anxious. As soon as we realize I can't control that, but I can control this part that's within me, then that reduces some of that anxiety. And interestingly, because when we're anxious, the body will release cortisol. Cortisol will affect the heart and the lungs. Like we said earlier, your breathing rate will change, but it will also affect your frontal lobe, which is where you do your cognitive thinking. So if we can get control back, we will reduce the anxiety, we'll reduce the cortisol, which means our frontal lobe will be able to think a bit more clearly and will perform better. So it's a key part of bringing so actually a better performance back to yourself as part of that process as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Colin. I still think other people behaved really badly in that. You didn't. You had that self-control. So can we now explore the second W question, the who do you want to be? How do we manage that, and what does that give us in terms of helping us move forward in a situation?
There is a sense when we, whether it's a simple moment or whether it's a big traumatic moment, we are just saying to ourselves, who do I want to be in this moment? So if we're having maybe a conversation with a colleague and it started to get a bit heated, we suddenly didn't realise, and all of a sudden we find ourselves, this person's getting really agitated. Who do I want to be in that moment is just saying, how do I want to come across? What values do I want to live by in this moment? And how do I want to behave? If I was watching this as a movie back afterwards, who do I want to be in this moment? I mentioned earlier, obviously, in my exit from headship, who I wanted to be was, look, I've got the pen. You write this story, Colin. This is where you find yourself in this moment. So you might find yourself in a really trashy, ploppy moment. You never chose it. You don't want to be there. You never selected it from a list or a menu, but this is where you find yourself. And so a bit like the hero in any story, in chapter 6, this is where they find themselves, in the swamp of despair, So what do you write next? And so it's the same for us. Who do I want to be in this chapter? This is where I find myself. Who do I want to be? If this were a movie, what would I want to see playing out? And just by that focus on it allows you to say that you've got the pen in this chapter. Write the story that you want to write. And it's again that pausing and reflecting allows you to think, who do I want to be in this moment? I don't want to react to this moment. I don't want to just go rah. I want to be someone a bit different. And so it's just tapping into that I have the pen, and what story do I want to write as part of this process?
And then the third of the W's is what values do you have to guide you? So how do they help within this overall process?
So like we said earlier, sometimes there's a process, isn't there, you can follow. If this happens, you do this. If the fire bell goes off, you exit in this way, and you count, you do on the register, and if the building's afire, this is where we, evacuate to, that sort of thing. And there is a playbook for you to follow, a rule book, a guidebook. but sometimes there isn't. And sometimes even within a process, there's a tricky moment. And so you think, how do I respond here? So let's take just an example. You know, you're having a conversation with someone and someone bursts into tears and explains they've just separated from their partner. Now, the rule book would say, well, I refer to HR and I do whatever, you know, but there's something bigger in this
that,
moment.
yeah.
If you just come out with the cold, oh, hang on, you're currently talking to me about separating from partners, so we can refer you to the employee support scheme using HR. Yeah, that's the rule book, but actually what's really needed in here are some values that are responsive. And so you're saying to, and that's the thing about values, is they can be dexterous. So I mentioned earlier, mine's authenticity and integrity. So I think the value, if we're selecting one here that's really important, is to be authentic. So the value that will guide me in this moment then of someone that's just said they've separated from their partner is I need to be authentic. What does authentic look like in this moment? Authentic tells me just to listen.
Yeah.
Authentic tells me not to make comment. Authentic tells me just to sit with them. Authentic tells me to be empathetic and just to listen.
Yeah, and not to maybe just try and carry on with the conversation you were having or planning to have.
Yeah,
because
that's right.
That's not...
Because actually, I might have been talking to you about the rota and the change in the rota, but now is not the time for rota. So what values guide me? Authenticity guides me this moment. I might also have compassion.
Yeah.
And so those values allow me just to flex with the situation and just be in the moment with it when there isn't a definitive. And even if there is a definitive, e.g. refer to the employee assistance program, it's the way we do that allows us to make the best of this moment, because that's what we're trying to do, the best that we can in this moment that we're in with all that we have. And sometimes we haven't got everything to hand. You know, we haven't planned for these moments and they suddenly come upon us as part of that process. It's just thinking they can guide us. Now, what can really help you, if you know your core values, like mine are authenticity and integrity, that can really help. But it's also thinking about some values that may help you.
That's great. Thanks, Colin. Now, the fourth W is where is the treasure in what you refer to as these ploppy moments. I have to say, finding treasure in some of those moments seems a challenge to me. So how do we get something out of them, find that gold to take away from it?
Yeah, I used the kind of picture story of the old gold prospector who would sit outside the mine, where the river is, and he has his sort of silt tray that he scoops into the river, and he kind of sifts it, and all the cruddy, muddy rubbish flows through and just leaves the tiny little flecks or the tiny little nuggets of gold on the top. So that's like the picture metaphor of what we're trying to do in the moment, is we're trying to say to ourselves, what's the gold here? Now, obviously, if it's a particularly ploppy moment, we might really struggle. You might say, there's so much plop
is there any
flowing through my sifting tray, very little gold here. But the key process, if you want to hold anything about, and you're struggling, it's what's the learning? Because an everyday alchemist moves away from binary. So in the book, I talk about, we see events as binary, pass or fail. But actually, if we look at that, they become high stakes. But if we change our mindset as to what this isn't just a moment as a one-off. It's actually a moment of longer term. So we're saying to ourselves, in this difficult moment of challenge that I'm having with someone, what's the learning here? What do I learn about myself? What do I learn about this person? What do I learn about the process? So, for example, if you're having a difficult conversation with someone, you've had to raise something with them, you're saying to yourself, what am I learning about maybe the skills or techniques I use this time? What impact does it have on the person? Does it make it better? Does it make it worse? When someone gets really angry at me, how do I manage this? And what am I learning from the way I'm managing this? If I just wait, if I just come back with a gentle question, if I ask them to tell me more, how did that work? What impact did that have on the person? And so we don't just see this difficult conversation, for example, as pass or fail. Do I change them to my point of view or not? Do I help them see that they've gotten something wrong and need to improve it or not? We go beyond that to go, what do I learn beyond this one-off for the longer term? So it's about helping us grow and develop as a person. So the key question is asking ourselves, what is the treasure?
Yeah.
We're almost saying the answer in almost every time is learning.
Yes.
Learning for the future is the treasure, but there might be a specific aspect about what I'm trying to learn in this moment. So we may, for example, if we're going through a really difficult moment, like, for example, my one, we suddenly find yourself out of work. What we might be saying, what's the treasure here is, what can I learn about people that help me? Or what do I learn about the best way to manage my emotions when I feel cross or upset? And so we're just asking ourselves that question around, what's the learning? What's the treasure? What's the growth that I can get out of this so that I don't just see this as the one-off moment?
So what I'm hearing is like the gold prospector panning through all the rubbish and letting it go. From some situations there might be a whole nugget of gold and learning, and in others it might be a tiny little flake.
Yes.
But that's still beneficial because all those little flakes, those tiny, will add up, won't they? So it's not always going to be a great big thing.
No.
But there will be something that can be taken away from every ploppy situation.
And it's just going with the eyes open. First of all, it's thinking, okay, I'm in this moment. As I'm in it, what do I think could be of benefit? I didn't choose this moment. It's not very nice, but what could be a benefit? And then it is a case, even if it's tiny, that tiny bit there and that tiny bit there, put them together, eventually makes a gold nugget, doesn't it? So it becomes something bigger that you piece together. So it's seeing these moments not as one-off moments, but a series of events to learn from.
That we learn from and grow and develop through that process.
And when we're in the moment, we're just saying, okay, who do I want to be? What values am I going to live by? And that last one of, okay, and what, in the moment, what do I want to get out of this? I want to get out that I learn X or Y, either about myself or how to manage that person or just generally how to manage situations.
That does make sense, thank you. And the third part of this process that we're talking about today is the respond part. What's the key elements of response once we've paused and reflected?
So we're in the moment, we've paused, we've noted all the bits about our body, we've noted our emotions, we've reflected around who we want to be and what's needed here and what you want to learn from it. And now you're about to respond. So there are some V's that help you here. And some key V's that will help you are to visualize and to verify. So the first one is to, in fact, the first one I'm going to talk about is to verify, to say, I intend to. So just before you respond, you imagine yourself saying to yourself, right, I intend to call my boss a dick because he's really annoyed me. Yeah. Now, if you go to say that to yourself, you'll go, short term, I might get some gratification at calling him this, but longer term, there will be repercussions. Maybe this isn't a good idea. So that last bit, that verifying allows you to do that. Now, more realistically, you're going to go, I intend to listen to really understand the person's point of view, if you're in an argument or a discussion with someone, and to take time to really understand them before I respond. That's what I intend to do. How does that sound, Colin? Then you go, that last bit of verification allows me to think about that. The other is to visualize. And so when you visualize, you are looking ahead to consider the longer term as well as the shorter term. How will if I do these things, how will that work? So it's almost a bit like a game of Connect 4. You know, in the game of Connect 4, just before you go to put in, you are not just thinking about this one-off moment, you're thinking about the other implications. If I do this, what will they do next?
Where will they go next?
And so if, for example, like we said, one of the moments you might find yourself in is a difficult conversation with someone. If I say this, how's that likely to be received, and therefore what's their next stage? You know, if this was Connect 4, what counter would they put in?
Yeah.
So you're not just thinking about that immediate, you're starting to think about, yeah, if I do this, how are they likely to respond? So if I listen to understand, how are they likely to respond? If I call them a rude word, how are they likely to respond? And so you're just thinking about, you're just visualizing that next stage. So again, what you're doing is you're gaining control of the situation. You're not reacting in that way. You're thinking about that next kind of step.
Yeah, I like that, Colin, and that what seemingly three simple words, I intend to,
Yeah.
clearly can have a big impact in that verifying before you respond. Where does that I intend to come from?
Yeah, so there's a brilliant book by a guy called David Marquette called Turn the Ship Around. And it's all about, he was a commander of a submarine, but it was a submarine that wasn't performing very well with its stuff. It's slightly worrying because it was a nuclear submarine. So it's like, you're slightly worried. You're reading a book about a nuclear submarine that's not performing very well.
Yeah.
So he was brought in to try and, you know, where are these mistakes happening and how do we ensure? And what he discovered was that a lot of people were just doing their job instinctively, reactively.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, they're doing some things instinctively that were wrong. And so he encouraged everybody to say the words, I intend to say them out loud so that you could hear them yourself, but also so your colleagues could hear. E.g., I intend to press this red button. And his colleagues would go, no, don't press the red button.
Don't do it.
Now, I'm sort of being slightly flippant to make the point, but it was that by saying what you intend to do, it allows your thinking to have that moment to think about it before you react. So you're not reacting, you are responding to the moment. Also, in the case of that particular story, it allowed colleagues to be your check and balance as part of that process. And in the book, Anna, I tell a brilliant story about I intend to. I tell the story of you when you were helping me out. So my school at the time had a bomb scare, and I had a bomb scare when I was 2.5, 3 hours away at a funeral, and it was my, you know, my assistant head got the phone call, and so I wanted to support her, and so I called you and said, please, could you help? And I talk in the book about how you go through that process of I intend to. So I wonder if I'll turn the interview tables back on you and just tell us a little bit about some of the things that you then did as part of that process of I intend to.
I mean, that's another occasion that is still so like fresh in my mind, because it was certainly not what I was expecting on that day. If there's a potential bomb at my school, can you get yourself over?
Could you head over to where the bomb is, please,
where the bomb
Anna?
is, Anna, because I'm not there. But yeah, I think it is that process of thinking through and just self-checking. So whilst I wasn't using those words, I intend to, that was what I was doing. Right, I need to go over. What do I need to take with me? I do remember it's like get these heels off and get your flats on.
So you had your head teacher power heels, and you decided to put your flatties on.
Put my flats on. What else do I need to take? High vis that you wear out in the playground in front of the school. High vis might be helpful. Whistle. Don't know why, but you never know. So let's have a whistle. Little notebook I had that had like phone numbers of people in the local authority and things like that. Mobile phone. Don't know how long I'm going to be. Grab the charger. And also, right, I'm now going out, so my team need to know. But if Colin's school's had a bomb scare, what if we get one? Do my office team know what to do? So just a real quick chat with them to make sure that they would be able to deal with it. And like, if we get one, phone me and I'll decide where I need to go. And then just also the practicalities of like, if there is a bomb at Colin's school, I don't want to go and park in the car park. So where can I leave my car once I've got there? What do I need to check when I get there? Are the police coming? Answer, actually, no, not terribly quickly. And you told me who to liaise with. And it's like, just, I want to go there and be helpful. I don't want to go in and look like I'm trying to take over control, because I'm sure they're doing what they've been trained to do. And I'm just there as some backup. So just thinking about, when I get there and get out of the car that I've parked, not in the car park, but at the co-op, how am I going to react to them, and just making sure I'm not going in like all guns blazing, flying in with my superhero cape on. It's just, I'm here to help.
So you were one of my everyday alchemists, just modelling. So in the book, as you know, we have a series of people for each chapter, and you're in that chapter where you model that, right, I'm going to go and do this, so I think I'll take this, I'll take this. And it's interesting, you said, oh, I'll take my mobile phone. I intend to take my mobile phone. Or what if I'm a bit longer? I'll need my charger as well. So just that thinking through that before you do it allows you to do that. And obviously this was a fairly needed swift response, but you still, even in that moment, had the time to think those things through.
To check it through, rather than dashing out, jumping in the car, getting down and going, I haven't got a phone. Now what do I do?
And so it's that pause, reflect, what do I need? And just before you respond, making sure you've got all those bits. I also tell in the book a story of another everyday alchemist, someone that we both know well, Sean. And Sean was a fellow head teacher. There were three of us who lived, all our schools were in close proximity. We worked well together. And as head teachers, we would phone each other. And I recount the story of Sean phoning me and saying, Colin, have you got a moment? Can I just talk something through with you? And he'd said, look, I intend to, and he would talk through how he was going to respond to a situation and would say, what do you think? And of course, 9 times out of 10, the person has got it completely right, but it's just that space.
Just that check-in.
To say, this is what I intend to do, and to be able to verify before you respond. And for that other person to ask you a question. So depending on what you're facing as an everyday alchemist, sometimes you've got to respond in the moment. So you haven't got time to phone a friend and ask, but sometimes you do. And you can just take 5 minutes to just check with someone, look, I intend to do this and this, what do you think? And when we don't do that, we can end up making a mistake, even even when we've got time. So just taking that time sometimes to say, I intend to do this and this. What do you think? And for them to ask us questions to double check can be a really useful way of doing that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Colin.
And thanks for reminding you. You were flashback of a bomb scare and having to deal with it.
Which I still think about sometimes. And you also explain in the book more about visualising in those situations. And there is a story involving your pants. I would just like to point out this is an appropriate story. We are not going in a direction that is inappropriate. So tell us more. So now anyone listening is going to be concerned about visualising in the word pants in the same line. So visualising as one of the V's about before you respond is just visualising, how do I want to feel? So we talked earlier on about, I'm feeling anxious or agitated or angry, and we have those physical feelings in our body and the emotions that we have. It's then saying, okay, so that's how I did feel at the beginning, but going into this, how do I want my body to feel? So you visualize how you want your body to feel, and then you go into it. And so it's a bit like, I use the phrase Google Yellow Man, where on Google Maps you could drop the yellow man and walk the route. And so you're almost saying, right, as I go into this, how do I want to feel? And so if I want to feel calm and composed, if I want my heart rate to be steady, then what actions will I bring about that will create that steady heart rate? Okay, so I'll smile. I'll shake someone's hand. Those actions will help me to feel calm, which will then generate that in my body. So that's what the visualize bit is. The story about my pants. So again, it's just looking ahead and planning. So the story about the pants was I many years ago went to buy a Ford Galaxy, and I was going to buy it from a place in Leicester, and it was going to be £7,000. And I didn't know Leicester. I didn't have anyone to take me in the car to collect the car, so I had to catch the train, and I was going to walk from the train station to this garage area, which I didn't know. And it's not, Leicester's a lovely place, but I detected that areas around train stations aren't often always lovely places, and I'm going to be walking around with £7,000 in cash. And it's like, well, somebody might want to rob that from me. So I put it in an envelope and in a plastic bag and put it down my pants. Because I'm thinking, if someone is going to
want the money, they're going to have to
Not
have an
easily
unpleasant
accessed.
experience to get the money. But in order to help myself, I visualised by Google Yellow Manning the route, right? This is the train station. I literally walked the route so that when I then came to it, I didn't feel so worried or so anxious because I recognised, oh, I go right here. Oh, I guess I go past the fast food joint there, and then the garage is just on the left. And therefore, when I came to it, I didn't feel so anxious. So there's the physical, literal Google Yellow Manning it to plan the route, which in some ways is that metaphor for planning ahead to reduce the negative feelings, but have the feelings you do. I wanted to be calm and composed going to get the galaxy. In order to do that, I needed to plan my route as
So
part of that
it's kind
process.
of like a visual rehearsal, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
going through. And
so in
and
this
just
particular
pulling
case, it was
together.
literally a Google rehearsal. But for us, if we're going into a moment, we're almost saying to ourselves, "How do I want to feel? And if I want to feel that, what actions will bring about that feeling?" In order for me to generate it. So that's the third V, just visualizing how we want to feel and who we want to be in that moment.
And we've really talked, Colin, about values, and values is a key theme running through everyday alchemy, isn't it? It's because they underpin everything.
Yeah.
So when we're at this responding stage, what bits of our values are we drawing on to help us with that?
I mean, there are some core values that will help us probably in many of these moments with everyday alchemy. So, for example, things like being curious, things like being kind of authentic are values that will really help us in these perhaps more tricky moments. But the values have that dexterity, and we mentioned earlier, particularly in volatile and uncertain and complex and ambiguous moments, because they give us that flexibility. So again, if we're just before we step into that response, we're saying to ourselves again, what values am I living by again? And what's this going to look like? And so, okay, so if I'm going to be curious, I'm going to ask questions. And so they then just guide us for that behavior. And as part of that approach, say, this is a tricky moment. I need to be authentic. What does authentic look like? Authentic just, again, starts from listening. Authentic means finding points of connection as I'm listening to them. So it's just using those values in that last minute to help respond.
I suppose that brings us back to the who do I want to be, and what we would all want to be the best version of ourselves. And yet again, those values are there underpinning that.
So again, I would advise people to just almost think, what are the core values I really stand by? Because then you've almost got them to hand straight away. Even if you're not thinking, well, what value do I want to live in this moment? You can still hold on to the core values that's so important to you.
Yeah, brilliant. So, Colin, we're nearing the end of our second podcast on Everyday Alchemy. So how would you summarise our learning?
So our learning is in the moment. We want to make the best that we can with all that we have in this moment that we're in. And so what helps us to do that is not to react, but to pause. That first thing, just pausing, noting what's in our body, what emotions we're feeling, and therefore noting whether we are actually in the right place. And if we're not, we take those steps to deal with that by bringing, a heart rate down, breathing, getting ourselves grounded. The next is then just to reflect on those 4 key W's. What's in my control? Bringing that locus of control back to you so that you don't feel out of control. If you're out of control, you feel anxious. If you can bring it back to what is within your control, you will then feel less anxious. That frontal lobe, you can then start to think a bit more clearly. Who do I want to be as that other key part? I'm in this moment. If I was to replay the movie later, how do I want to look? And so you begin to go, I want to be calm. I want to be composed. I want to be thoughtful, whatever it is that you decide in that moment. And then what values can guide me? If you know your core values, they'll probably always rise to the surface, but you're just thinking, what values are important here in this moment? And obviously, depending on the moment, will depend maybe what values you want to bring in. And then where's the treasure? So this is not a one-off. It is a one-off moment, but it isn't a one-off moment. Yes, we want some success in this moment, but it goes beyond this moment. It's a bit like in the previous podcast when we talked about the artist. You produce that end painting, but it's actually what do I learn about art and my technique that goes beyond this moment. It's the same for us as everyday alchemists. what can I learn from this in order to help me
Yeah.
ongoing? And then I reduce the pressure of this one moment. It isn't just about me passing it or failing it, doing well in it or not. It's about growth and learning. And then that last thing is, just before I respond, I want to kind of verify what I intend to do. Does that sound good? If I was listening to this from somebody else, would I be going, sounds like a great idea to me?
Yeah.
And then you visualize again who you want to be in that moment and the feelings that you want to have as part of that process. So our learning today is around, in the moment, to make the best from it, I need to pause, reflect on who I want to be, and then respond in a way that I'm going to be proud of.
Great. Really good summary. Thank you. And what will we be looking at next time?
Well, so in our next podcast, having looked at what we do in the moment today, we're going to be starting the journey of what we do afterwards. So Everyday Alchemy goes beyond just the moment. The real learning, the real growth, that real thriving comes from us reviewing and reflecting on what's happened. So in our next session, we're going to be looking at the first two of the 4 bits afterwards. We're going to look at how we revisit it and review it. And then the podcast after that, we're going to be looking at those next two about how we reframe and rebuild it. But our next one is looking at that, how we revisit the moment and really review it to get a better and fuller picture and better and fuller understanding. Okay. Anna, thank you for interviewing me today in the second of our podcasts. Viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us in the Leadership Lounge and finding a little bit more about Everyday Alchemy, and particularly how we make the best of moments by pausing, reflecting and responding. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us again in the next one.